is Tobias. I'm a Google Play BD manager based here in Berlin, and I'm happy that White Knights is here for the first time in Berlin as well. I'm with Google now for 9 years actually, and my remit is to work with our top partners in Western Europe. And one key question our partners are asking myself and my team is, what about influencers? Everybody's working with them. We are not too sure about them. Can you maybe give us some advice on how to work with influencers? So that's why my talk today will be about understanding the full value of influencers, because we did some research on how to work with influencers, and today I'm happy to share the insights with you. But first, let me give you some quick overview on. Okay. I can also click like this. Let me give you an overview of the overall agenda. So first, I will start with what is the opportunity of working with influencers. Secondly, what we did in our research. I will share some measurements and key insights. And last but not least, our idea of how you could work with influencers and creators out there. So let me start with one very obvious thing. YouTube, where many influencers are, that's a key discovery channel for games. So 90% of all gamers turn to YouTube at least once a week to get to know more about the games they are playing, to discover new games, and also to learn more about cheats or tips and tricks. Hopefully not too many cheats. Then, of course, game developers are following those influencers because they are investing, at least in the last year, more than 250 million in partnerships to ensure that their games are being shown. There are many different ways of doing partnerships in a better way and not so good way. I will talk about this a bit later. But obviously, influencers are on YouTube. Game developers are there as well, investing money in partnerships and so on and so forth. So there is something about it. But there's also one key challenge we are seeing, and that's what we call the attribution challenge of the industry. So if you would be thinking of a video online where somebody has posted a gameplay video, usually an influencer would say, hey, and if you like the game, please download it and click on the link in the description. And some people might do it, some people might not. One quick question here. Who here in the audience, also for the people who are just coming in, has been working with influencers so far? Is here an influencer, by the way? Would you consider yourself as an influencer? Okay, whatever. And who in the audience would think that he or she is 100% perfect in measuring the impact of working with influencers? Okay, one. Okay, perfect. We talk later in the Q&A. So basically, what usually happens, there's a link in the link in the description of the video, and then people try to measure what the impact is, and pretty often that then leads to some person in the online marketing department looking at, okay, this is the tracking link. There's maybe some more people who didn't click on the tracking link, and I'm now trying to estimate the impact because marketeers love impact, ROI, and don't care about too many other things, mostly. So what we were thinking is that there must be more than just the tracking link. We were thinking that there is what we call the non-tracked majority, because there are people out there who might be watching the video, but they are not clicking on this link. There might be people out there who are watching, but they're downloading later on Wi-Fi. Or they are watching the video on their PC, but they are downloading on their smartphone. So these are like 3 ways of how a tracking link cannot help you to attribute the success of influencers. And then also, this is basically harming influencers as a possible marketing channel and is questioning the overall strategy of working with them. So what we did at Google, we thought about a methodology for measuring the full value of influencers. So what we did is we took a cohort of signed-in users on YouTube, and we looked at what they were doing after watching the video on YouTube when then being active on other Google properties, such as Google Play. So basically, looking at one user and looking at the full journey since they were signed up both on YouTube and both on Google Play. And for doing so, we looked at different key attributes, such as what is the install per view rate in terms of attribution window, let's say 4 hours, 1 day, 4 days, or also what about the spend of those users after they download the game on Google Play. So that's the methodology we applied to find out what's more to working with influencers. And then what we did is we reached out to some partners and developers we are working with and basically asked them, hey, can we work together to figure this out? So in the past year, we looked at more than 150 videos and more than 25 million views. So a large number of content. And we looked at games of all sizes, genres, different life cycle stages. We looked at influencers who are from the gaming industry, who are not from the gaming industry. And we also looked at more established influencers and micro-influencers. So the one thing is the methodology. The other thing is how to apply it and to ensure that you get some knowledge which can be used as some common sense. And for doing that, we applied these measurements to a large number of videos from all different kinds. So that's what we did. And today, I would like to share some of the insights we were gaining by looking at the full user journey, just going beyond the tracking link and some other things. So our key findings will be basically separated in findings about the gamers and the users, and then also some findings we found out about the different influencers. So let me start with the obvious question, and I might be starting to annoy you with this already. So about this tracking link thing. So we were looking at how many people are actually downloading the game without clicking on a tracking link. And it's actually, for every person who's clicking on a tracking link, there are on average 4 people who are not clicking on the link, but still downloading the game on Google Play. Which means that you can use basically 4x as a multiplier of your influencer campaign, which then changes the overall discussion about effectiveness of influencers, your marketing strategy, and even how you launch or roll out your game. And also, personally, I like to be a bit more conservative when giving out numbers. So when we did this research and basically compared data of the user journey on Google properties versus the data of tracking links, we also saw some peaks where the multiplier was 10x. Just to give you an example, of course, it depends by video, it depends by game, and so on and so forth. But 4x is a very, very strong but also conservative multiplier we basically generated. And also one thing we found quite interesting is that 50% of all installs basically happen within 4 hours after watching the video. So people who are engaging with influencers and their videos, they act very quickly. So much for that, but we also found out some other interesting bits. So let's take an example. You are a developer and you have 2 games, and those games are quite similar, right? There are some developers who have a portfolio strategy of games. And then you work with an influencer and say, hey, why don't we work on this one game, and if you like the game, maybe talk a bit about that. And then that influencer is doing that. There are actually people who are watching that video but would download the other game in your portfolio, which is quite similar. So for every 10 people who are watching a video about game A, there's even 1 person who's downloading game B in your portfolio, which means that you have so-called ripple effects. So basically, if you're running a portfolio strategy for games, which is also pretty known for cross-promotion, you have these slight benefits on influencer marketing campaigns as well. And also, again, we were seeing in some examples that even for every 10 people who are downloading game A, there are 3 people who are downloading game B. So it varies a bit, but on average, it's at least one person, and you have positive effects across your portfolio. Last but not least, something which is rather obvious, but I think it's sometimes good to iterate messages we think are right. So one, of course, targeting is key. So go for the channels, go for the influencers who are matching quite nicely with your game. But then also, we found on average that users between 24 and 49 are 3 times more likely to buy after watching a video of an influencer and downloading the game. And also, they have a 30% higher average revenue per paying user. So obviously, this is an evergreen or a key target audience of games, but I thought this insight is quite interesting as well. So much for our insights on what happens to the users. Let's talk a bit about the influencers themselves. What have we found out, and is there anything you can use moving forward when working with creators? So one thing we found is that if you work with the same influencer again and again, there's something what we call download fatigue, which means if you work with the same influencer within 12 months, the second video might lead to 2x less installs than the first video. That doesn't necessarily mean that you should only work with an influencer once, because maybe you want to reiterate the message, maybe you want to work with the same influencer again for building your community, or maybe it's just part of a package, right? But it's important to know that if you want to drive installs with an influencer, you probably want to focus on the first video with that person. And then one very interesting insight we had, but also a very big discussion many of our developers are having with us and companies in the market space. Influencer campaigns are not app install ads. I mean, that's very obvious, because within app install ads, whatever network you use, you have basically a creative, you have a budget, you have a bidding, and off you go. With creators, it's way different. You need to select the right people, you need to find out if they actually like your game, if they would like to play your game, because if they don't want to, people will feel that, and it will have a negative effect. So it's much more effort to work with influencers. And also what we found out is that if you just evaluate influencer campaigns compared to app install campaigns, you have basically maybe not as strong ROI measurements. So this is something to take into account as well. However, there are other things, and I will talk a bit about that later as well, which only influencers can do, and app install campaigns maybe cannot. And that's something which is more about building a brand and building your community. And last but not least, there was also one segment which stood out from all the influencers we were looking at, and those were the rather smaller influencers, what we might call micro-influencers, because for those type of influencers, we saw a very good return on ad spend compared to normal app install performance marketing campaigns. So if we look at creators who have just 10 to 100,000 subscribers, we found that their CPIs are up to 3 times lower than more established influencers, which makes sense, right? It's basically a market out there, and it's about demand and what you pay for, an install at the very end. But it's still something to be aware of, because if you're not sure about working with influencers, why not start with micro-influencers first and see how it's going for you. At the same time, the conversion rate is in line with established influencers. If you want to go for the bigger guys, that might make sense as well, because you might have more publicity, you might have a bigger K factor, a bigger lifetime value, but still it's a great way to start with influencer marketing if you go for micro-influencers, because this shouldn't harm your return on ad spend. All right, so this is now a summary of all the findings we had so far. I've talked about the installs, the ripple effects, that targeting matters obviously, and also some findings we had when you work with the same influencers, and how you can be most effective when running influencer campaigns. Okay, so let's start now with the third part of today's talk, which is about building an influencer strategy, because these are all nice insights, hopefully, but now the question is, so what? What are you going to do with these things? And probably, if you go back to your office tomorrow or later this week, I heard White Nights has parties as well. So, but at some point you will go back to your office, and somebody in your market team might ask you, and not to use any stereotypes, but that person might look a bit like this. So that person might ask you, so what did you learn about the value of working with influencers? And then you can basically show this person this slide. This is the slide we're just looking at, but it's now including our recommendations of what you want to do on each point. So you might want to take into account our 4x multiplier when you're looking at installs from influencer campaigns. You want to be sure that there are ripple effects across your portfolio. So this is a good reason for you to think about working with influencers if you have a portfolio strategy for your games. Targeting matters, as mentioned before. You can tell your marketing people that download fatigue is a thing, and they should just be aware of it and how to get around it. And also, when it comes to influencer campaigns, maybe it makes more sense to try negotiating a revenue share or a CPI deal. But one thing you can definitely do is to hedge against potential low IAP revenue of people coming from influencer campaigns by having ads in your game, because every view you are getting from people who are being driven to your game through influencers can be very helpful as well. And then, again, you might tell your marketing colleague, or maybe it's yourself, that micro-influencers are a great way to test. And this is basically one thing I would like to recommend or would like to advise you on. There's some best practices we have found when talking to developers, and by no means this is not like the whole playbook of this. There are even more focused companies and agencies who know this even better. But one thing obvious is that if you want to work with smaller micro-influencers, maybe if you want to find them, just look on YouTube and see what's happening already on your channel. See who is playing your game already. Maybe look at their friends. Who are they subscribed to? So ideally, it's a great way to just see what's happening already on YouTube and then take it from there. And then, of course, you're in a good position to build good partnerships with the smaller influencers. So you have a good understanding of your game. They are quite small. Maybe they not know what to work with and which games are good. So you can help them a bit, and you can build a strong foundation, which will hopefully last for a few years or at least months. And then one idea as well, you shouldn't only work with one smaller influencer. What about scaling up? Work with many influencers at the same time. And if you think this is too much effort after you have tested and found it useful, there are also agencies and platforms in the space you can work with as well. And with the knowledge gained from today's presentation, I hope you're even more comfortable in briefing them and questioning them and having a good campaign success. So, but I've mentioned this before, that influencers can do way more than just the, giving you an ROI on your installs. So we talked about this tracking link dilemma. We've solved it for now, but there is more to this. So if you go back, there's maybe not only the performance marketing person in your office, there might be even some person who's looking after social media. And again, to not use any stereotypes, but he or she might look a bit like this. So what is important for your company and your people in terms of social media and PR? Well, this is getting more important than ever, because whilst ROI and the focus on performance marketing is key and is the way how the games industry has driven itself to a very profitable, big industry on mobile, we truly believe that anything which is about building communities and being social will become much more significant in the next years. One reason for this is, and we love formulas at Google, so I had to put up a formula, obviously, but one reason for this is that there are more and more high-fidelity, high-quality games on mobile getting released each year, and every year it gets more tougher for developers to release a game successfully. You have also increasing marketing costs, whatever channel you use. And then there are more and more multiplayer games, whether it's MOBA or whatever type of games, getting out there. And basically, if I play a multiplayer game, I'm more or less occupied, and it's hard for another game developer to acquire me as a potential user. And that basically all sums up the need for creating a community. Because in this market environment, it's not enough to just have profitable campaigns, whether it's Apple Store campaigns, influencer campaigns, or whatsoever. And I think the games industry, especially on mobile, is very strong with this. It's also creating a need for building a community, ensure that people like and know your game, and ideally fight for it, being an advocate for it in forums, online, and so on and so forth. And I would like to close today's presentation with an example of a developer who has been working even before the release of their mobile game on creating a community for this. It is the mobile game developer Space Ape Games. they have been developing their new mobile game Rumble League. And even before the release of the game, because it's not out there yet, as you can see, even the video is not out there yet. Let's see if it's going to work or not. But even before the release of the game, they invited a pro team to play the game against the developers. And now let's have a look at that. Yeah, so we're in Germany here. And as you probably know, the Wi-Fi and connectivity standards in Germany are not as top of Europe. So to end this, basically, the video is basically showing how Rumble League is getting played by both the developers and pro team. And so this way, these influencers get to know the game already. They have the chance to give feedback from early on. And once the game is out there, or it's giving, there's early access or a beta version, they will activate their community and they will be super strong in supporting that title. And that's even stronger than just booking one campaign with somebody out there. Okay. If you want to have the full video, I can send you a link afterwards. Let's see. Yeah, of course you need to have swag. That's very important. Company swag, yes. All right, cool. So that's basically how I would like to close my presentation. One, I hope we were able to give you some insights and what's in it for you when working with influencers. They are highly effective, and there are many more things you might not be thinking of when it comes to downloads. But also, one thing to keep in mind, taking all the performance marketing knowledge and focus aside, is that it's about building communities more than ever for mobile game developers. And I hope you can take these recommendations back home, back to your team, back to your office, or just here out there into the break. Thank you very much.